you began your talk very well with talking about the difference between an atheist and a believer. At least in that case, they agreed on the topic, whether or not there is a God. That's great. Now, talking about reunification, I think the situation is similar but different. For example, there seems, among the various reunification efforts and movements, including within the Zhongtouhui, there's a focus on what they are doing more than what the other parties who may be recipients understand what they are doing. There is so much confusion of people talking past each other. A simple example, somewhat relevant, is in the recent peace talks. There's not even agreement on what the summits are about, like in Hanoi and Singapore. Just the fact that they agreed to meet and talk past each other. So my concern, and I don't know if it's a question, is when people get involved with these reunification movements and spend a good amount of time, effort, and money, I'm not sure if they really are doing it more for reunification than for themselves, as feeling good that they're doing something for a noble cause that's not well defined. Because, okay, reunification, but what is reunification? There's so many different opinions of what that would actually be. So I wonder, maybe the Zhongtouhui should be focusing its resources on other things, such as elimination of the death penalty in South Korea, or given opportunities for conscientious objectors to find acceptable roles in society rather than compulsory military service. So I'm not criticizing the Zhongtouhui, but I'm just raising my concerns about allocation of resources and time. I understand the corn donation is very noble, and hopefully the corn will be given to the people who are actually hungry and not simply the people who do not actually need that food. But it could be a situation where people feel good about raising money for the corn for North Korea, when in fact it may not be so purposeful, but it makes them feel good. So I don't know if I have a real question, but only a simple concern that may not even be appropriate for this format, but here I am.
네, 좋은 제안 감사드립니다.
So thank you for what you said.
예. 질문자가 그렇게 생각할 수도 있습니다.
So that is your right to think this way.
또 다른 사람은 달리 생각할 수 있죠.
So obviously others can think differently.
Right.
네, 저는 질문자의 의견을 존중합니다.
And I respect your opinion.
그럼 또 우리는 우리대로 통일운동하는데 이유가 있습니다.
For us, there is a reason that applies to us and why we engage in unification effort.
우리가 통일이라는 용어를 쓰지만은 우리는 실질적으로는 평화가 우선입니다.
So we use the terminology unification, but we are really engaging in a peace effort.
전 세계에 200여 개의 나라가 있습니다.
So there are 200 plus countries around the world.
크고 작은 분쟁이 있는 나라가 40여 개의 나라가 된다고 합니다.
And they said about 40 of those countries are experiencing small to large conflicts right now.
그러나 그 대부분은 이렇게 국지전의 양상입니다.
But most of them are very limited.
그런데 한반도에서는 그 전쟁의 위험이 높을 뿐만 아니라 그것이 대량 살상을 가져올 수 있는 그런 조건이 있습니다.
But in Korea, not only is the danger of a military conflict high, but if there is one, there's a high likelihood that it will lead to a mass casualty event.
지금부터 69년 전에 6.25 때는 280만 명이 죽었습니다.
So 69 years ago, during the Korean War, 2.7 million people died.
근데 지금은 그때보다 양쪽이 가진 이 살상 무기의 양이 엄청나게 더 많습니다.
But now we have a lot more weapons of mass destruction on both sides.
그때도 남북한만 전쟁이 아니라 국제전이었습니다. 중국과 미국이 개입한.
So even then, it was an international war effort, not just limited to North and South Korea.
지금도 마찬가지입니다.
Same thing now.
그렇기 때문에 여기는 전쟁이 일어난다 하면 엄청난 많은 사람이 죽고 특히 남쪽 한국 같으면 지난 50년간 우리가 일궈놓은 산업시설이 파괴될 위험이 있습니다.
So if there is a war now, there will be a lot of casualties, especially in South Korea.
또 북한의 핵무기만 위험한 게 아니라 남한의 핵발전소가 파괴된다면 이건 엄청난 위험이에요.
And it's not the nuclear weapons of North Korea that's dangerous. Any destruction or damage to the nuclear facilities in South Korea is bound to be damaging as well.
그렇기 때문에 우리는 그런 사형제도 폐지 그것도 필요하지만 그것보다는 전쟁 방지가 더 중요합니다.
So to us, I understand eradication of death penalty. Those issues are noble and important, but to us, peace is more important.
어떤 경우에도 전쟁은 안 된다.
So under no condition should war be allowed.
이런 관점입니다.
That's how we're approaching this issue.
그래서 과거의 전쟁을 끝내고
So let's finish the war that happened in the past,
앞으로 평화롭게 살아야 된다.
and let's live in peace.
이제 이 관점에서 저희들이 활동을 하고 있습니다.
This is the perspective from which we're approaching this effort.
그리고 지금 북쪽에는 20년 전 고난의 행군만큼은 아니지만 지금 식량 부족 현상이 아주 심각합니다.
So currently, North Korea, although they're not suffering as badly as did 20 years ago during the arduous march, but the food situation is dire.
그렇기 때문에 우리는 우리의 만족을 위해서가 아니라 그들에게 식량이 필요하기 때문에 지원하려는 겁니다.
So we're not seeking to get any self-satisfaction out of this. We're trying to fulfill a need that we see and acknowledge.
만약에 우리가 직접 눈으로 볼 수 있다면 모든 사람이 다 알 거예요.
And if we could actually see them suffering and become eyewitness, I think all of us would actually willingly engage in this effort.
그러나 여기 문제는 그게 우리 눈으로 볼 수 없다는 데 문제가 있습니다.
But the problem is that we cannot see their suffering with our own eyes.
그래서 여기 신뢰할 수 있는 게 무엇인가?
So what can we trust?
첫째, 유엔이 조사한 결과가 식량이 부족하다고 말했습니다.
So basically, we are trusting of the findings of a UN report that says there was a food shortage in North Korea.
두 번째, 많은 이 민간 기구에서 바깥으로 흘러나오는 얘기가 식량 부족이 심각하다는 증언들이 계속 나오고 있습니다.
And second, we're trusting the eyewitness anecdotal evidence of a lot of civil society organizations that tell us that they are actually seeing food shortages.
그래도 또 이게 믿기가 어려운 측면이 있잖아요.
But then again, there's still a little lingering doubt.
그래서 제가 방문해서 어떤가 체크를 해봤습니다.
So I visited myself and checked the place out myself.
뭐 죽는 사람을 눈에 보거나 그건 아니지만은 식량 상황이 매우 위급한 곳이 있다 하는 것을 알게 됐습니다.
So I didn't see any starving people, who were about to die of starvation myself, but I could definitely see that there were shortages.
이 수출이 막힘으로 해서 이 공장이 스탑된 게 많습니다.
And there are a lot of factories that had to shut down because of the sanctions.
그러니까 석탄이라든지 이런 광산 지역입니다.
Especially hit hard those mining regions, for coal and
그러니까 공장이
whatnot.
스탑되니까 월급을 못 주고 나가서는 식량 공급도 안 되고 있었습니다.
Since those factories have stopped working, they could not afford to give their workers food.
그래서 식량을 지금 지원하려고 하는 겁니다.
So that's why we're engaged in this effort to give them food aid.
Well, look, I think we're all in agreement on all these facts, and I'm in total agreement with you on this, but I think there's maybe a problem of communication, because what you are talking about is more along the lines of a peace or humanitarian efforts than a reunification. So if maybe it's a problem within the Zhongtohe rather than yourself, but if you are talking about reunification rather than humanitarian relief, it's very confusing for people who do not know in detail what you are trying to achieve.
세계 지금 200여 개의 나라가 있는데요.
So as I said, about 200 plus countries around the world.
제일 많은 나라가 여러 민족이 하나의 민족이 하나의 나라를 구성하는 겁니다.
So most is one ethnicity per country, right?
두 번째는 여러 개의 민족이 하나의 나라를 구성하는 겁니다.
Then it's followed by multiple ethnicities occupying the same geography, right?
근데 하나의 민족이 여러 개의 나라를 구성한 것은 극히 드뭅니다.
But it's rare that you see one ethnicity occupying multiple countries.
그것은 어떤 공동체가 하나의 민족 단위로 이루어지거나 또는 몇 개의 민족 단위로 이루어지는 것이 인류 역사의 보편성입니다.
And I think that's because, you know, how the human society evolved. It evolved in a very kind of tribal, ethnocentric way.
남쪽이나 북쪽에 있는 대중들은 정치 지도자는 모르지만 대중들은 가능하다면 하나로 같이 살고 싶어합니다.
So we don't know about the political leadership of both countries, but I think, you know, the everyday people, you know, all in all, I think wants to live together as one ethnicity, as one Korean.
좀 추상적이긴 하지만
It is a little abstract, I agree.
그러니까 가능하다면 그렇기 때문에 통일로 나가는 게 좋다는 거.
So if at all possible, I think, you know, supporting that sentimentality, I think it's good to kind of strive towards unification.
근데 무조건 통일해야 된다는 건 절대 아니에요.
But I'm not saying that we need unification no matter what,
왜냐하면 그렇게 되면 전쟁까지도 합리화시킬 수가 있습니다.
because then you can actually justify war
Right.
into the service of unification.
그래서 첫째, 전쟁은 절대로 안 된다는 게 먼저 전제돼야 됩니다.
So that's why the first premise of this effort means that there's no war at any cost, no matter what.
그 전제 위에 통일을 하면 좋다는 거예요.
And I'm saying that a unification is a good outcome based on that assumption.
그러려면 서로 합의를 해야 합니다.
If you want to bring that about, however, you have to compromise.
합의가 안 되면 시간이 계속 갑니다.
And without a compromise, you know, we'll be wasting time.
그래서 지금 합의를 해서 가기 때문에 뭐 일방적으로 하려는 건 아니에요.
So the quick result would be is the South to accept North Korea leadership, because have more and be more flexible and compromising. So maybe we should simply accept the Pyongyang government to be the ruling government for the entire peninsula, and we'll be reunified.
그것은 어떤 것도 결정할 수가 없습니다.
So I don't think we can decide.
No.
You know.
네, 지금은 우리는 그 방향으로 가자는 거예요.
So I'm saying that unification is an objective.
근데 첫째 여기 상호 협력을 하면 경제적으로 우선 서로에게 유리합니다.
So, but what I'm saying is that there are benefits to cooperation, especially on the economic front.
근데 경제적 협력을 하려면 먼저 평화가 정착이 돼야 돼요.
But to have a cooperation on the economic front, you need to base that on peace.
네, 그래서 북쪽의 노동과 자원이 좀 풍부하고요.
So, North Korea can offer labor and a lot of material,
남쪽은 자본과 기술이 우수합니다.
and to the raw material in the north and the labor, south has the capital and the skills.
그래서 서로 협력하면 상승 효과가 날 수가 있습니다.
So I think there will be a synergistic effect if we can cooperate on the economic front.
저는 이것이 통일이나 다름없다고 생각합니다.
So to me, this is similar to unification.
이미 유럽은 그렇게 해나가고 있지 않습니까?
That's what Europe is doing.
그러다가 정치적 군사적인 문제는 시간을 두고 해결해 나가면 됩니다.
And then military and political matters, I think we can actually allot a little more time, give it more time to resolve itself.
뭐 북쪽이 더 빨리 원하면 빨리 할 수도 있고.
If North Korea wants to resolve it faster, then we can adjust to that.
그것은 이제 현실에 맞게 해 나가야 돼요.
And we got to be realistic in how we approach this.
Right, but we also have to understand the other perspective, including economic cooperation can be militarized by cynical political governments. But basically, I agree with you.
네네, 그렇게 되기 위해서는 북한의 비핵화와 전쟁 종결이라고 하는 평화협정이라 하는 것을 지금 해결해야 된다. 그래서 지금 하고 있지 않습니까?
So that's why we need to, in order for that to happen, we need to resolve that issue of denuclearization of North Korea and with a peace treaty and actually have a peace regime over the peninsula.
Yeah, the difficult point is when you say we, who do you mean we? Are we talking about South Korea and North Korea? For example, the North Koreans really do not think it's an issue with South Korea. They think it's simply an issue with the United States as being an oppressive imperialist power, and South Korea is just
세나
yeah, and so and that they need to keep that perspective to legitimize the way they rule North Korea. So I mean, I'm just bringing up these points. I think, frankly speaking, if I'm not suggesting you should be trying to do something different, but I'm just worried when you use the label reunification, because even if your mind you have a fairly sophisticated framework, it could be confusing to the common people here, a little bit there about what the Jungtohei is doing.
전쟁이 나면
If there's
미국은 먼 곳에서 전쟁하니까 물자만 손해 나지 인명 피해는 별로 없습니다.
So if there's a war, U.S. will suffer losses, but mostly material losses, right? Because it's outside of the country.
북한은 뭐
Well, that's
어차피
assuming
없는
that the North
살림이기
is not able
때문에
to send
이러나
missiles.
저러나 뭐 해볼 수 있다 이런 생각을 할 수도 있습니다.
I think North Korea, they can say, I think they might be willing, kind of a suicide effort in a war, right?
Right.
That's their
그러나
attitude.
그렇기
Possible.
때문에 피해는 남쪽이 제일 큽니다.
That's why it is the South who will suffer the most damages.
그래서 전쟁은 절대로 안 된다. 이것은 남쪽에 있는 사람들의 입장이에요.
So I think from the South Korean perspective, no war at any cost, right? That's-
그러나 이 비핵화 평화 협상의 문제는 이 핵을 가지고 있는 건 북한이고 그걸 강력히 반대하는 건 미국이기 때문에 또 그게 협상이 안 되면 피해가 한국이 가장 크기 때문에 우리는 3자가 이 문제를 공동으로 해결해야 합니다.
But in terms of the nuke issue, it is the North Korean who holds the nukes. It's the U.S. who opposes it most strongly. But the failure to reach a compromise, South Koreans will bear the brunt of their failure. So I think it's those three countries who should be the primary we in solving this problem.
Yeah, but well, we can talk about this further, but other parties have a stake in it too.
네. 한국에 살지 않는 사람들은 이게 부차적인 문제일 수도 있는데 한국 사람들은 이게 부차적인 문제가 아니라 가장 생존의 핵심적인 문제입니다.
So this could be a kind of a secondary, more of an abstract problem for those who live outside of Korea. But for those of us who live inside Korea, this actually is the most primary issue to our survivability.
다른 분들은 다른 나라 사람들은 해결될 수도 있고 안 될 수도 있고 돼도 그만 이런 문제 안 돼도 그만일지 문제는 우리로서는 반드시 해결해야 될 문제입니다.
So to non-Koreans, this is an interesting problem that could be resolved or not, or resolved in this way or that way. To Koreans, it's something that needs to be resolved peacefully.
다만 조급하게 할 생각이 있다는 건 아니에요.
But I'm not saying that we have to hurry into a resolution.
협력해 가면서 국제사회와 협력해 가면서 해결하겠다는 겁니다.
It's something that we need to resolve at its own pace in cooperation with the international community.
네, 다음 분.
Next, please.